More teenage boys have heard of Andrew Tate than Rishi Sunak. That's just one stat from a poll by Hope Not Hate that makes for pretty scary reading. It was written up by The Independent. They say this: research found that 8 in 10 boys aged between 16 and 17 had either read, listened to, or watched content from the misogynistic Success Coach. Around 6 in 10 boys had heard of the Prime Minister, and roughly 4 in 10 knew who London Mayor Sadiq Khan was. Just slightly more than around a third of boys had heard of the Labour leader, Keir Starmer. They go on to report this: researchers who polled over 1,200 people in the UK aged between 16 to 24 discovered that 45% of men have a positive view of Mr. Tate, while only 26% held a negative opinion of the influencer. When probed about why they like Mr. Tate, most said they thought Mr. Tate wants men to be real men, or that he gives good advice. However, just 1% of women aged 16 to 17 had a positive opinion of Mr. Tate, while 82% viewed him negatively. Now, that disparity is so depressing. You know, these are people who go to school together. These are people who should be friends, should be hanging out. I mean, probably many of them are friends and hanging out. But you've got this figure who is splitting opinion so starkly. So a plurality of boys, 45%, saying this guy is someone to be looked up to. Only 1% of girls agree. Now, obviously, that's also, looks a bit like a statistical error. You've got 82% who disagree. So that is... I just find it so depressing that there is this character, this influencer, this TikToker who is just putting this huge wedge in between teenage boys and teenage girls. I think it's horrific, evil. I don't use that word very much on this show, but I do kind of think it's kind of evil dividing people like that. Very depressing. Also, it's not inexplicable. Let's look at an interview with Tate on the BFFs podcast last summer.
You say a lot of stuff about women like that they're your property.
That's not what I said. I was talking about an OnlyFans company when that question was asked. But I said that if a woman is going out with a man, she belongs to that man. That's his woman. So she wants to do OnlyFans. She owes him some money because she's his.
Well, that's crazy. That one's crazy.
So you think that a man going out with a girl, that's just your property?
That one was nuts.
I'm nuts now. Good.
If a guy and a girl is dating and a girl does OnlyFans, she owes him a cut?
She is his girl.
But what does that have to do with anything?
Because she's his.
So that is you saying that women are your property.
It's not about being property. It's about the fact that she belongs to him. And the intimate parts of her body belong to him because they're in a relationship. And if she wants to sell those, he has a stake in those intimate parts of her body.
So it's reverse. A male porn star owes the woman.
I don't know, because I think the women belong to the man. I think the woman's
that's inherently where you get called sexist for.
Andrew Tate is currently in custody in Romania under suspicion of trafficking women. He's also subject to at least 2 allegations of rape. Aaron, 45% of men between 16 and 24 have a positive view of this guy. What can we possibly say about that? How depressing is this?
Well, for me, the numbers that really stood out, Michael, was actually, the extent to which young people know about him. And the fact that he's more widely known than the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. Look, most young people aren't that political. Most people aren't that political. But the Prime Minister? I mean, that's really saying something. And it really shows, I think, the importance of particular media, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, if you want to get to a certain subsection of the population. The thing around who likes him and who's impressed by him, look, I have a few thoughts on this. First of all, young people are strange sometimes, right? Particularly young men. They might have contrarian views on things. They're working life out. I think that applies if somebody's 18, less so if they're 24. So I'd be interested in seeing the data on, say, 18 to 20-year-olds and then 20 to 24-year-olds. I think it's somewhat, it could just be a phase with a young person or a young man. If you're in your mid-20s, I think that's something quite different. And it has to be said that he has an impressive story. And I should say, a lot of the story isn't true, okay? So he's going around saying that he's worth several £100 million. From what we can see in this investigation thus far, that's not remotely true. He says he comes from a working class background and he's driving around in a Bugatti Chevron. He lives this jet set lifestyle. He can buy what he wants, do what he wants. He's a 4-time world champion kickboxer, yet he's also really good at chess. He's a very competent, fluid public speaker. He's accomplished at all the things our culture says you should be accomplished at as a man. That's really good. He's earning lots of money. He's competent in a bunch of areas. He's good at fighting. He has a fast car, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I can see why a young man would say, yeah, that's really impressive, right? I can. Now, maybe some people watching this would disagree, but I think to an extent that's explicable. Of course, then you get the stuff on top of that, which makes all of that immediately irrelevant, which is the stuff he has to say about misogyny. And this is really important, Michael. The stuff he's saying, he said that a man has a right to a certain cut of a woman if she's his partner and she's on OnlyFans. He's describing a pimp, right? He's describing a pimp. And that's not a coincidence, because he made his money with basically a cam girl factory, first in the UK, then in Romania. And this is something else I find really strange. He talks about being a man, morally centered. He's recently converted to Islam. You made your money from selling sex, right? You made your money from selling sex. Do you not see a strange contradiction here? You talk about being a man, you don't have, and he talks about protecting and being this, strong, masculine, patriarchal, heteronormative figure. You don't have a family. You don't have any children. So I think lots of it is performance. Not that he has to, by the way, but it's weird that he's trying to channel these archetypes, and yet the reality of his life is something very, very different, right? He's talking about traditional moral values, yet he is basically a pimp. He talks about how a man has to provide for his family, yet he doesn't have one. So I think a lot of this is performance. I think a lot of it is attention seeking. And I think young people gravitate towards those sometimes who are attention seeking. And I also think, Michael, this is something else we haven't really talked about. Young people rebel. Young people don't like to accept or adopt the things that they're told. And that's often a good thing. There's a great quote, I can't remember who said it. And they said, a society is dead when the young can no longer surprise you. And I think this is surprising, right? And I wonder to what extent, with regards to the success really of socially liberal values, this was inevitable, in so much as you do have a reactionary backlash where the counterculture is nonsense like this. And I think that's part of it too, Michael. And I don't think that'll be a majority part of the culture. But we've talked about this before. I do think over the coming years, coming decades, a big minority of men will have actively misogynistic, outrageous views on things like bodily autonomy, on things like sexual assault, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that will be, a backlash, a counter-revolution against really big changes in the last 50 years regarding sexual equality. So I think there's a broader sociological explanation. I think there's another sort of explanation here that is, Tate is, for want of a better word, captivating. He's entertaining on some of the social media he produces. He gets people's attention. He's different. He's saying something different. And I think the challenge here, Michael, is to offer young men in particular two things. Firstly, better role models, better forms of entertainment, but also to tell the truth about how this, who this guy actually is. He isn't who he says he is. He's not as wealthy as he says he is. I suspect he doesn't own a lot of these cars. But he does channel the things that our society says are important. And his story of rags to riches is hugely appealing, Michael, to younger men, particularly from poorer backgrounds, who want to make something of themselves and look at the high street, look at the economy, look at society, and feel like they're not getting anywhere. That's my concern.
I do have, actually, sort of related to what you say, a couple more clips of Andrew Tate. I mean, I also find them incredibly depressing, but it is important to note that 45% of boys thinking he's good doesn't necessarily mean that these are 45% of boys who are just gagging to see someone say how much they hate women. I think that's, he's slipped that in, which is what's so dangerous about it. But let's look at a couple of these videos. So this is one where he tells the rags to riches story that Aaron was talking about.
I recently bought a very expensive car, too expensive. I'm an idiot. I bought a Bugatti, and when I was at the Bugatti dinner, everyone else there was either daddy's money or oil money, right? And they had no respect for anything. To me, it was a massive deal, right? But because they'd never ever been poor, they had no respect for it. So it's kind of like you can be a working class man and sit down with a cup of tea at the end of the day, and you'll enjoy that cup of tea more than this oil billionaire will enjoy his $5 million car. Because they have no respect for anything. So if you don't respect something, you can't value anything. If you don't value anything, you can't be happy. It's kind of like if you're in a car traveling at 100 miles an hour, it doesn't feel fast, right? But when you're accelerating to 100, it feels fast. That's how life works. It's not about being in a particular place. It's about getting there. That's the only part that's fun. Being there is whatever. So if you're born with it, then I think life can be kind of sad. So yeah, I'm super happy I grew up broke in Luton on free school dinner.
So that's the rags to riches story. He also gives out advice. So it sounds like tough love advice. Let's take a look.
I think a man should have absolutely no interest in whether he's actually happy or not. If I wake up and I'm unhappy, I will do the exact same things as if I am happy. I will go to the gym the same. I will work the same. How I feel has no impact on how I live my life. I don't think happiness as an index is a healthy view for a man to have on life success. If you're waking up and going, oh, am I happy? Am I not? You're looking at life wrong. I think as a man, if you put happiness if you move it down the scale, right? And you start looking at, am I successful? Am I competent? You know, am I achieving things? Am I respected? If you start to look at these indicators of your life, you're going to end up being happier without actually analyzing if you're happy or not.
Aaron, I think it's obvious, like the most toxic thing about Andrew Tate is his misogyny. The most depressing thing from this polling is sort of the wedge it's putting between men and women. And I think the danger is putting women in the sort of way he talks about them. I also actually find the lifestyle advice for men also like really depressing. Like that's to me seems like an absolute recipe for sadness. Sort of saying your happiness doesn't matter. What matters is that you're strong and people respect you and that you try and own a Bugatti. Now most of these kids aren't going to own a Bugatti. That's not how capitalism works. There's only very few people who can get a Bugatti. And they're normally people who are born to privilege anyway. It seems to me that one, he's selling people a violent, horrible ideology, which is putting women in danger. It also seems to me that he's setting up quite a lot of young men for like misery and failure, essentially.
Yep, completely, Michael. Look, there are two positions here, right? If you don't have housing security, you don't have enough money, you don't have access to things you need, you can either pursue the Andrew Tate approach, which is life is a war of all against all, and you can scratch your way to the top and you can knock out a few people on the way and you might get there. Or you can have the Novara Media approach, which is actually we need a shared social transformation of society, something resembling a socialist economy where people get access to the things they need, whether it's housing, food, education, transport, healthcare. I think that's a far more sensible approach. And I think that really underpins the importance of articulating a socialist politics en masse to precisely the kinds of people who presently find Andrew Tate's message appealing, alluring, persuasive.